I still remember the first night I stayed alone in that old suburban house. The silence settling around me like a living thing. The streetlights outside flickered to the half-open blinds, casting long, trembling shadows across the worn carpet. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, faint but steady, and the occasional creak of the wooden floor beneath my own feet. Somewhere in the house, a door whispered close, though I had checked every room. My heart thumped softly. Try to convince me it was just the house settling. But then I felt it, a presence, hovering at the edge of vision, never fully seen. I wanted to look directly, to confirm that it was nothing, but something in the darkness held me back. Then came the faintest tapping, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from the hallway just beyond the living room. That's when I saw it, a pale, distorted figure lingering just beyond the doorway, unmoving, yet impossibly alive. I never should have stayed in that house alone. Pace your chapter here. The house was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums in the air, even when you hold your breath. It was late afternoon, the sky pale and washed out, the color of old paper. The wind pressed against the walls in slow, uneven sighs. I remember thinking the house looked smaller than it had in the pictures, but inside it felt endless. Each room opened into another, doorways framed in dust, corners folding into shadow. The air smelled faintly of damp wood, like something that hadn't been opened in years. When I set down the first box, the floor groaned beneath me, a long, tired sound. For a moment, I thought the house was breathing. I kept unpacking, one box at a time. Plates, books, a framed photo that I didn't hang. Every noise I made felt too sharp, echoing, cutting through the stillness. There was no music, no cars outside, only that slow rhythm of the house settling, with flexing, pipes sighing. But sometimes, just in between those creaks, I could hear something else, a softer rhythm, like someone walking. I told myself it was the old foundation shifting, the same story every new homeowner tells themselves. By evening, the light had turned orange, slipping through the dirty windows. Dust floated in the beams like small, patient ghosts. I remember brushing one from my arm and feeling cold where it had touched. The kitchen faucet dripped, a steady tick that marked the silence. Drip, pause, drip. I found comfort in it at first. Something familiar, something alive. But when I stood near it, the dripping stopped. I turned the handle. Nothing. No hiss of water. No movement in the pipes. Just a faint hum of the refrigerator, though I hadn't plugged it in. That's when I realized the air felt thicker, like the house was listening. I moved slower after that, my footsteps soft, careful, the boards whispered beneath me. Small sighs that rose and faded with each step. Upstairs, the hallway was narrow, lined with doors. All closed, all waiting. The last door on the left had a small keyhole. Through it, I saw nothing. Just dark, unmoving dark. I tried the handle. Locked. A small draft moved past me, cool and damp, carrying the faint smell of earth. I turned, expecting to see an open window, but everything was still. When I walked back toward the stairs, one of the boxes at the top shifted, just slightly, a small scrape across the floorboards. I froze. The air felt heavy in my chest. I waited, listened, nothing. I went to pick it up and felt warmth against my hand. The side of the box was warm, as if someone had been touching it just before me. That night, I didn't sleep upstairs. I unrolled my blanket in the living room, near the window, where I could see the porch light spill across the steps. The silence was thick again. I could hear my own breath, the ticking of my wristwatch, and faintly, something brushing along the hallway ceiling. A slow, dragging sound. I stared up at the ceiling for hours, waiting for it to stop. It never did, only grew quieter, until it blended with the rhythm of my heartbeat. When I finally closed my eyes, I dreamed of footsteps, soft, bare ones, moving from room to room. In the morning, everything was in place, except for the locked door upstairs. It stood slightly open. No sound came from inside. No movement. Just a soft current of cold air that smelled of dust and something faintly sweet, like flowers left too long in a vase. I didn't go in. Not that day. I told myself I'd unpack first. make coffee, get used to the noises. But even as the day brightened, the house stayed dim. Shadows lingered in corners that should have been full of light. And sometimes when I passed by that hallway, the door was closed again, by itself. The faucet still refused to run. The refrigerator still hummed quietly. And every night since, I've heard the same slow footsteps above me, moving in silence, keeping time with my breath. And sometimes when the wind dies, I swear the house exhales, as if it's waiting for me to finish unpacking, as if it's been waiting for me for a very long time. It started with a single light, the one above the kitchen table. It flickered once, then again, a soft, trembling blink that filled the room with uneven breaths of light. I thought it was the wiring. Old houses do that. They hum, they sigh, they forget how to stay bright. But the way it flickered, slow at first, then sharp, like it was trying to speak, made the air in my chest tighten. The rest of the house was dark. Only that one bulb swayed gently, its glow stretching long, restless shadows along the cracked walls. Each flicker felt alive, like a heartbeat in the ceiling. I stood beneath it for a while, listening, waiting for the rhythm to steady. The shadows on the wall moved when I didn't. They rippled, as if the light was bending around something that wasn't there, something standing just beyond my reach. I whispered to myself, "It's just the current, the old wiring." But my voice didn't sound like my own. The light stuttered, and for half a second, I was in complete darkness. In that moment, I thought I heard breathing, soft, uneven, not mine. When the light returned, it was dimmer. The bulb buzzed faintly, a low hum that vibrated in my teeth. I could smell the faint burn of dust, warm and metallic. I reached up to twist the bulb tighter, but the air around it felt cold, colder than the rest of the room. My fingertips brushed glass, and for just an instant, I saw a movement behind me, a shadow crossing the far wall, slow and deliberate. I turned. No one, only the kitchen window, half covered by a thin white curtain that swayed without wind. The light flickered again, fast now, erratic. Each flash revealed a different room, a still frame of my life in pieces, the empty chair, the half-unpacked boxes, my reflection in the window, pale and frozen. Then darkness, total. I held my breath. The hum had stopped. Everything felt hollow, like the house was holding its breath with me. My heartbeat sounded loud in my ears. I could hear it echoing inside the walls. Then, click, the light came back. Steady, almost normal. But something was wrong. The chair at the table had moved. It was no longer tucked neatly under the edge. It sat slightly turned, facing me. I stood there, bare feet pressing into the cold floor, trying to remember if I had done that earlier. I hadn't. I was sure I hadn't. The hum returned, softer this time, almost like a whisper. I could feel it in the air, brushing the back of my neck. The bulb began to pulse again, slow, rhythmic, like the rise and fall of breathing. I felt a weight in the room with me, something unseen, watching, listening. The walls seemed closer now, the shadows deeper. Each flicker carved new shapes into the darkness, long arms stretching, faces forming in the uneven light. I tried to look away, but the shapes moved when I did. They followed. They waited for the next flicker to change. And when the bulb went dark again, the hum stopped completely. Silence. Thick, smothering silence. Then came the sound of the chair, with scraping slowly across the floor. I didn't move. I couldn't. My eyes adjusted to the faint outline of the table, and I saw it. The chair was closer, a few inches, nothing more, but closer. When the light flickered back on, the chair was still, right where it shouldn't be. I stepped back until my shoulders pressed against the wall. My fingers found the edge of the switch plate. I flipped it off. The bulb went dead. For a second, I felt safer. Darkness meant stillness. No flicker, no hum. Then, behind me, a faint spark. The bulb glowed again on its own, dim like a dying candle. Enough to see the table. Enough to see the chair, now facing the window. I could feel the cold drifting in through the glass. And somewhere within the reflection, just at the edge of sight, something moved, not inside the room, but in the glass. It leaned forward, as if it had been sitting there all along, just waiting for the light to come back. I blinked. The bulb steadied. The reflection was gone. Only my face stared back. Tired, pale, shaking. I switched the power off at the wall this time. The light didn't fade. It simply stopped. No glow. No hum. Nothing. I backed away, feeling my way to the doorway, and stood there for a long time, listening. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It felt heavy, crowded. I think whatever was in that flicker learned something about me. The way I breathe, the rhythm of my pulse, the quiet I can't escape. Now, every night, before I go to sleep, I unplug every light in the house. But sometimes, just before I drift off, I still see it. That soft, pale glow, blinking once in the kitchen, like it's reminding me that it's still there. It started with a chill. A soft draft I couldn't find the source of. The heater was running. The windows were sealed. But that one corner of the living room, it stayed cold, colder than the rest of the house. Even in the afternoons, when sunlight touched every other wall, that corner stayed untouched. Still, gray. I told myself it was nothing. An old vent, bad insulation, something simple. But it didn't feel simple. It felt like the air there was holding its breath. Every time I walked past it, the temperature shifted, not suddenly, just enough for the hairs on my arm to rise, for my breath to grow visible in the air. At first, I avoided looking directly into it. That corner, it wasn't even remarkable. A narrow stretch of wall beside the old bookshelf. A lamp stood there once, but I moved it away. The light never reached far enough anyway. At night, when the rest of the room was quiet, I could hear faint rustling, like fabric moving, or someone turning slowly, trying not to be heard. Once, I left a glass of water on the coffee table. By morning, it was rimmed with frost. Everywhere else was warm. The heater hummed softly, its steady rhythm comforting at first, until I noticed the hum stopped whenever I faced that corner. The air would fall still. The silence heavy. I began to test it. Small things. I'd place my hand closer, inch by inch. The chill deepened with every inch I took. When I reached the wall, the cold sank through my palm, up my wrist. It wasn't the cold of air. It was deeper, like touching something that didn't want to be touched. I pulled away, and my fingers felt numb for hours. By the third day, I started noticing the smell. Faint, sweet, like old flowers. The kind left in a vase long after they'd begun to rot. I searched the floorboards, the vents, the corners of the bookshelf. Nothing, but the smell grew stronger when the lights dimmed, almost as if it woke up with the dark. Sometimes I thought I saw something move there, a soft distortion, like heat waves, but cold, a shimmer, just enough to catch the corner of my eye. One night, I sat on the couch, watching that patch of shadow. The clock ticked slowly. The heater whirred, and still, the air in that space stayed frozen. The longer I stared, the more I felt like it was staring back. My eyes burned from not blinking. I thought I saw a hand, faint and pale, pressing out from the wall. Just for a second, the shadows bent, the light trembled, and then it was gone. I didn't move for a long time after that. When I finally stood, the air in the corner stirred slightly. A soft exhale brushed across my cheek, cold and damp. And I swear, I heard something like a whisper, not a word, just a breath. That night, I dragged the couch across the room. I didn't want to face that wall anymore. But even from a distance, I could feel it, the cold spilling out across the floor, creeping toward me when I closed my eyes. The next morning, I woke to find my breath hanging in the air again. The heater light blinked red, still running. But the temperature inside had dropped 5 degrees. The corner was darker now, almost damp. A faint trail of condensation crawled up the wall, like the house itself was sweating. I pressed my hand against it once more. The wall pulsed beneath my fingers. A soft vibration. Slow, rhythmic, alive. Something moved behind it. I stepped back, nearly tripping over the edge of the rug. The chill reached my ankles and my knees. It spread, like water poured across the floor. I backed into the hallway. The second I crossed the doorway, the air changed. Warm again. The silence broke. The heater hummed back to life. I stood there, staring at the room. Nothing moved. No sound. No breath. Just that cold corner. Quiet and waiting. I started leaving the lights on after that. All night. But even then, sometimes I'd wake to find them flickering. The shadows stretching long and thin toward that side of the room. I tried covering it once. Pushed a bookshelf against the wall. Stacked boxes in front of it. But each morning, they'd be slightly moved. Shifted just enough to see the edge of that corner. Bare. Open. Now I keep the door to the living room closed. Always, the air in the rest of the house feels normal again. Almost peaceful. But sometimes, when I walk past the door late at night, I can still feel it. That faint, frozen breath, slipping through the crack beneath the frame. And if I stand too long, the warmth fades from the floor beneath my feet, as if it remembers me, as if it's waiting for me to come back inside. It was just past midnight when I heard them. Soft, measured, footsteps. They came from upstairs. Slow, careful, like someone was trying not to be heard. But I was alone. I'd been alone all week. The house was quiet before that. Only the faint hum of the heater, the ticking clock by the couch. Outside, the wind had stopped completely. The kind of stillness that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. Then, the first creak, with bending under weight. One step, pause, another. I froze. The air inside my chest turned heavy. My ears strained against the silence, searching for what came next. The floor above me moaned again, a slow drag, then a soft thud, like someone shifting their stance. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house settling. I knew that sound too well. I looked toward the staircase. The light at the bottom was faint, pale from the single lamp I'd left on. Beyond that, darkness, thick and quiet. The steps continued, pacing from one side of the ceiling to the other. I could trace the path in my mind, across the hallway, past the locked guest room, stopping just above me, right over the living room. I sat perfectly still. The air around me grew colder, as if something had opened a door I couldn't see. For a moment, it stopped. The silence, after, felt louder than the sound itself. I could hear my own breath, shallow and uneven, the kind of breathing you try to hide. Then another step, this time closer to the stairs. That would whisper beneath unseen weight. I could picture the railing trembling, the faint dust shaking loose from the corners. The steps paused again, right at the top of the staircase. I waited for the next sound. A shift, a sigh, anything. But nothing came. The stillness stretched so long that I almost convinced myself I had imagined it, until the stair creaked. Just one, near the middle, then another, and another, each one slow, steady, descending. My heart beat in my throat. I didn't move. Couldn't. The light from the lamp reached only halfway up the stairs. Beyond that, the upper steps faded into shadow. Something was coming down, but I couldn't see it. The steps stopped halfway. A long pause. Then the faintest exhale. Cold air brushed against my cheek. I could smell it, damp, like rain-soaked wood. I whispered to myself, "Don't look," but my eyes moved on their own. There was nothing there, just the still shape of the stairs. And yet I could hear it again, the sound of bare feet on wood, soft, dragging slightly, moving back upward now. It climbed, step by step, back toward the empty hallway. I rose slowly from the couch, my hand brushing the back of the chair for balance. The air felt heavier the closer I got to the staircase. The hum of the heater had stopped again. When I reached the first step, the house fell silent. Completely. The light flickered once, casting long shadows across the walls. The upstairs landing waited above, black and endless. I took one step up. The wood groaned beneath me. Nothing. No movement. No breath. Just still air. Then from above, a soft shuffle, right near the guest room door, followed by the faint click of a latch. The door had been locked. I was sure of it. I climbed slowly, each step a whisper against the floor. When I reached the top, the air was freezing. I could see my breath drift into the dark. The guest room door stood open. A thin sliver of pale light spilled across the hall floor. I didn't remember leaving a light on in there. I approached. The light flickered once, as if responding to my movement. Inside, the room was empty. No furniture, just bare walls and a single window. Fog with condensation. The air pressed against me, thick and cold, like walking into deep water. In the corner, the floorboards were darker, wet, and faint footprints. Bare, small, led from the window to the door, then stopped, right where I stood. I felt the floor tremble beneath me, a soft vibration, like someone walking below, back and forth, across the living room. My body went still. I turned toward the doorway, listening. The steps downstairs matched my heartbeat, one after another, slow, deliberate. It was beneath me now, where I had been sitting minutes ago. I stepped back into the hallway, bare feet touching the cold floor. The light from the guest room faded. Everything turned dim again. Then silence, complete. I waited for another step, but none came, only the faint hum of the heater, starting again as if nothing had happened. When I looked back into the room, the footprints were gone, the boards dry, the air still. I closed the door gently. The latch clicked. Back downstairs, the lamp glowed steady and soft. Everything looked the same, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had simply switched places with me, that whatever I'd heard was now standing quietly in the room below, listening, waiting for me to fall asleep. It began quietly, just a soft murmur in the dark. At first, I thought it was the wind, slipping through cracks in the walls, breathing across the floorboards. But the wind doesn't say your name. The room was still, the heater off, only a faint hum from the ceiling light, barely enough to keep the corners visible. The closet door sat at the far end of the room, closed but not latched. A thin line of shadow cut through the gap at the bottom. It had always been there, unremarkable, a quiet shape in the dark. Until that night, the first whisper came so soft, I wasn't sure I'd heard it at all. Just a breath, drawn through the dark. Then my name, faint, almost gentle. I turned toward the sound, but the air was empty. The closet stood still, its door unmoving, its outline untouched. I whispered back, barely louder than a breath. Nothing. The silence felt heavier after that, like the air was waiting for me to say something more. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of exhaustion. But when I lay down again, the whisper came back, clearer, closer. My name, spoken slow, as if the voice was learning how to shape it. I sat up. The bedsheets brushed against my legs, cold and thin. The whisper stopped. The room was too still. No creaks, no hums, no sound of the night outside. I waited. My heartbeat filled the silence. Then, a soft rustle from inside the closet, fabric moving, like clothes brushing against each other. My throat tightened. I stared at the door, counting the seconds between each faint movement. It was deliberate, slow, a steady shifting, like someone gently swaying inside. The air around me grew colder, that kind of chill that doesn't just touch your skin, it seeps beneath it. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, my feet meeting the wooden floor. It was cold, colder near that side of the room. I took a step closer. The whisper came again. My name, drawn out, barely formed. This time, it came from lower down, as if it were crawling toward the crack beneath the door. I froze. The room felt smaller now, walls pressing closer, air thinning. The whisper grew quieter, but more distinct, like breath moving against the edge of a mouth. Each time it spoke my name, it sounded a little more certain. My fingers twitched. I reached the doorknob, then stopped halfway. I didn't want to touch it. The metal looked wrong in the light, dull but wet, like something had pressed its lips against it. I stepped back. The whisper followed, not louder, but nearer, right behind the thin wooden frame. Then silence, the kind that feels thick, alive. I could hear the faint static in my own ears, the sound your mind makes when the world holds its breath. Then from behind the door, a soft thump, as if something inside had fallen forward. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the rug. My heart pounded, loud enough that I almost missed it. A whisper, not my name this time, just a single word, low, indistinct. but somehow pleading. I didn't move for a long time. The door stayed still. The silence stretched thin. When I finally reached the lamp, the bulb flickered once, then died. Darkness swallowed the room. The whisper returned, right beside my ear. My name, soft, familiar, like someone standing inches away, breathing the syllables into my hair. I turned sharply, but there was no one there, only the faint scent of dust and something damp, like old wood left in the rain. The closet door creaked open by itself, just a few inches, enough to break the line of shadow across the floor. Inside, nothing moved, only darkness, thick and uneven, folding inward. The air spilling from the opening was cold enough to sting my throat. I waited. Every instinct told me not to look, but my eyes kept drifting to the gap, to that darker dark within. I could almost make out a shape, low to the ground. Still, too still. Then a whisper again, my name, spoken from deep inside. But this time, it wasn't a question. It was a warning. The door creaked wider slowly, as if pushed by something careful, patient. And in the faint light from the window, I saw it, a shadow stretching across the floor, thin at first, then growing longer. It reached the foot of my bed. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The whisper stopped. And in that last silence, I realized it wasn't calling me. It was mimicking me, trying to learn the voice, trying to get it right. Now, I sleep with the closet door locked. Every night, I check it twice, but still, sometimes just before I drift off, I hear it practicing. A faint voice in the dark, whisper my name, again and again, a little closer each time. It started with something small, something that shouldn't have mattered, a missing set of keys. It was late evening, the kind of quiet that hums after a long day. The kitchen light buzzed softly, a pale circle of yellow against the cold tile. I remember setting them down, right beside the sink. The ring clinked once against the counter, sharp, metallic, ordinary. I remember that sound, because it was the last time they were where they should be. When I came back for them, they were gone. At first, I thought I'd misplaced them. It happens. You rush, you forget. But I searched the counter twice. Then again, the space where they had been felt wrong. Too clean, too bare. The faint mark of the metal ring still pressed into the dust on the surface. A perfect circle. But the keys weren't there. The air felt strange. Heavier, like the house was watching me realize it. I checked the sink, the drawers, even the trash. Nothing. And then I noticed the silence. No hum from the refrigerator. No creak from the pipes. Even the clock on the wall had stopped ticking. It was as if everything had paused just long enough for something to move. When I finally turned, the keys were on the floor, not dropped, placed just beyond the counter's edge, perfectly straight. The keyring turned at an angle, as if someone had been looking at them before letting go. My first thought wasn't fear. It was confusion, that slow, quiet kind that crawls up the back of your neck. I reached down to pick them up. The metal was colder than it should have been, almost damp. A faint, oily scent clung to my fingers. Old iron, dust. I put them back on the counter, in the exact same spot. This time, I watched them. The refrigerator hummed back to life. The clock ticked again. Everything sounded normal, but the air didn't feel normal. Not anymore. I left the kitchen light on that night, just in case. The next morning, the keys were gone again. The imprint of the ring was still there on the counter, only deeper this time, as if pressed down by something heavier. I found them in the hallway, halfway between the kitchen and the front door, resting in the shadow where the carpet meets the wood. I picked them up again, and that same chill ran through my hand. It lingered, even after I set them down. By the third day, it had become a pattern. Every time I looked away, the keys would move, sometimes just a few inches, sometimes across the room, always placed neatly, like someone was testing how far they could go without me seeing. I stopped trying to explain it, stopped talking to anyone about it. It wasn't something I could describe. It wasn't about the keys anymore. It was about what was touching them. That night, I sat in the dark, facing the counter. I wanted to catch it. Whatever it was. The house was silent again, completely still. I placed the keys in the center of the counter, waited, Watched. Minutes passed. Then an hour. My eyes began to ache from the dim light. The silence pressed tighter. And then the faintest sound. A scrape. Metal sliding softly against stone. The keys moved. Just half an inch at first. Then another. Slow. Careful. Like something unseen was tracing its finger along the ring. I didn't move. Didn't even blink. The air rippled. The way it does when heat rises from pavement. Only colder. And I could smell it again. That faint with iron scent. Then the keys fell. They landed upright against the cabinet. Not flat. Not by chance. Balanced. I stared for a long time, trying to understand how something like that could happen without a hand guiding it. When I finally reached out, the metal was ice. My fingers burned from the cold, and for just a moment, I felt pressure against my palm. Not hard, just a soft, deliberate touch, like something pressing back. I dropped them instantly. They hit the floor again, spinning once before coming to rest. Perfectly aligned with the doorway. I didn't pick them up that time. I just backed away. By morning, they were gone again. Not on the floor. Not on the counter. I found them later, inside the front door lock. The door was still bolted shut. But the keys were hanging there, like someone had tried to let themselves out and change their mind halfway through. I keep them in a drawer now, hidden under old receipts and papers. But sometimes I hear them shift. A faint metallic scrape, barely there, coming from the other room, like they're moving again, searching, trying to find their way back to the counter. The nights had grown longer since I moved in. Or maybe time had simply stopped keeping count. It was late, past midnight, and the air inside the house felt still. Heavy. Every breath left a faint cloud in the pale light. The hallway stretched before me, a narrow line between rooms, paint faded, floorboards soft with age. It always seemed darker there, even when every light was on. That night, I stood at the edge of it. The bulb above me flickered once, then steadied. That's when I saw them. Shadows, long, stretched in across the walls, moving slowly, as if walking from one end of the hall to the other. But there was no one there. The walls shivered with faint motion, black shapes twisting against the pale paint. Too tall, too narrow. Their limbs bent at wrong angles, their steps too slow to be human. My eyes adjusted. I waited for something ordinary, the light shifting, a reflection, a trick. But the shadows didn't fade. They grew. Each time the bulb buzzed, they stretched further, crawling upward, reaching the ceiling. Like something unseen was standing between the walls and me, breathing softly, waiting. The air felt colder near the hallway. I could almost feel it. The temperature dropped, the way cold clings to skin like damp fog. I could smell it too, that faint scent of dust and old wood, wet plaster. The floor creaked once, then again, but not under my feet. It came from halfway down the hall. Something shifted there, a darker patch within the dark, swaying like it was breathing. I didn't move, didn't blink, and yet the shadows did. They bent toward me, slowly, like they had noticed I was watching. The light flickered again, and for a moment, everything froze. No movement, no breath, just silence. When the light steadied, the shadows were closer. A few feet away now, their edges sharper, like hands pressed against invisible glass. I wanted to step back, but the air behind me felt thicker, like the house didn't want me to leave. The floor groaned beneath the weight of something unseen. The shadows rippled. One leaned, longer, slower, until it touched the far wall, its head brushing the ceiling. And in that small, suspended moment, I realized there was no source, that no object, no body, just the shadow itself, existing where light shouldn't allow it. I could hear something faint, a low hum, like breath pulled through a hollow throat. It grew steadier the longer I watched, almost like words trying to form. I took one step forward. The hum stopped. The shadows froze again. And then, from the far end of the hall, a door creaked open, just a few inches, enough to let a thin slice of darkness spill across the floor. That was when I saw it, the largest shadow, move into that thin line. It disappeared into the gap, as if slipping through the door. My pulse slowed. Every sound in the house returned at once. The hum of the heater, the tick of the clock, the faint buzz from the ceiling bulb. Everything was normal again, except for the door. It was still open, and behind it, the darkness wasn't just dark. It was deep, thick, like a hole that swallowed light. I stood there for what felt like an hour, trying to convince myself to walk away, to close it. When I finally stepped forward, I noticed something on the wall beside me. The shadows were gone, all but one, a long, thin smear near the baseboard. It stretched away from my feet, curling toward the open door, and when I lifted my hand, the smear trembled like it was reacting to me. I froze again, and that's when I saw it, the faintest movement inside that dark doorway. Not a person, not an animal, just another shadow, standing perfectly still. It tilted slightly, like a head, like it was watching me. The light flickered again, and the hallway dimmed. When it steadied, the door was closed. No shadow, no hum, nothing, only the faint warmth of the bulb above me and the quiet creak of the house settling back into itself. But the walls looked different now, darker around the edges, like something had soaked into the paint. Later, when I tried to sleep, I left the hallway light on. I told myself it was just to be sure, just to keep the shadows away. But around 3 in the morning, I woke to that same flicker, that same buzz, and through the thin crack beneath my door, I could see it. A long, dark shape stretching across the floor, slowly shifting, as if walking past my room. No footsteps, no breath, just shadow, moving again, through the hall. And this time it didn't stop. It began with a chill, a single breath of cold that moved through the house like it had a purpose. It was late. The air outside was still the kind of quiet that feels layered, thick with night, heavy with waiting. That I sat by the small lamp in the living room, reading something I can't even remember now. And then the light flickered, a brief, soft tremor that brushed against my arm like static, that I thought maybe I imagined it, until I felt again that a slow draft, rolling through the room like an unseen tide. It slipped beneath the collar of my shirt, coiled around the back of my neck. Cold, too cold that I looked toward the windows, all shut tight, curtains still, not even a thread moved. The air smelled faintly metallic, like wet iron and frost. And under that, something faintly sweet, rotten sweet. I checked the vents, the cracks, the seams in the old wooden frame. Nothing, not even the smallest gap. But the cold kept moving, trailing through the hallway, whispering along the walls. It didn't rush. It drifted, like it knew where it wanted to go. I followed it. Each step made the floor sigh beneath my weight. The air grew sharper the closer I got to the center of the house. The space between the kitchen and the back door, that's where it was strongest. I could see my breath now. Thin, white threads in the dim light. They hung in the air longer than they should have, as if time had slowed down there. The draft circled my legs, curled around my hands. I reached out toward the door. The handle was freezing. I pulled it open. Nothing, just still night and fog pressing against the glass pane. But when I shut again, the cold didn't leave. It lingered, almost heavier now, like something had slipped through with me. The lights dimmed for a moment. A soft hum filled the air, the low vibration you feel in your teeth more than you hear. It came from the walls, from the floorboards, from everywhere. And then the cold began to move again, not random this time. It pressed past me, sweeping down the hall, turning corners I could remember them. I followed without thinking. The house seemed different in that pale light, longer, emptier, as though the walls had pulled back to make room for it. The draft slipped beneath the door to the spare room, the one I never used, the one that always smelled faintly of dust and old wood polish. When I opened it, the air inside hit me like a wall, freezing, dry, still. The lamp inside flickered once, and that's when I saw it. The curtains moved, just a little, like something invisible brushed past them, and behind them, the faintest sound of breath, not steady, not human, more like the slow exhale of something enormous trying not to be heard. The draft swirled around my feet, lifting the dust into a soft, gray spiral. It shimmered in the light, as though there was movement inside it, shapes, Faint outlines that disappeared when I blinked. I whispered something then. I don't even remember what. A word, maybe, or a question, but the air responded, the hum deepened, and the cold pulled upward, curling toward the ceiling before snapping back down again. A rush of freezing air that knocked the lamp against the wall. IT went dark that I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe. The draft wound around my chest like a pair of hands. Not tight enough to hurt. Just deliberate. Curious. And through that frozen air, I could feel something near me. Close. Watching, the darkness shifted. I thought I saw it then. A shape forming where the cold was thickest. Something tall. Still, edges too soft to be real. The cold reached its peak. The smell of frost burned in my nose. And then silence, just like that. The air went still. The warmth crept back in, slow and hesitant. The hum was gone. The room was empty again. I turned the lamp back on. Its light buzzed weakly, glowing against the walls that now looked a shade darker. The curtains hung motionless. No fog, no breath, no draft. But when I looked down, the dust on the floor had changed at a trail. A thin, curved line that looped around my feet and stopped at the door. Like something had circled me once before leaving, I stepped back, heart thudding, watching that faint trail fade as the air warmed. Now the house feels different. Even when it's quiet, I can sense it. The shift in temperature that moves through the rooms at night. That IT comes and goes. Sometimes faint, sometimes sharp enough to steal my breath. And every time it does, it passes through that same door, the one leading to the spare room, always moving the same way, as if it knows its path, as if it's not just air, but something colder, something alive. It started just after midnight. The house had been quiet for hours, the kind of silence that feels thick, like it's holding its breath. I was in the kitchen, pouring water from the tap, when I heard it, soft, distant, almost playful. Laughter. It drifted through the air like smoke, curling around the corners of the room. Faint, hollow, as if it had been recorded long ago, and the house was just playing it back. At first, I thought it came from outside, maybe a neighbor, maybe a late TV show through thin walls. But the window was closed, tightly sealed. And the laughter, it wasn't coming from beyond the glass. It was coming from inside, from somewhere near the refrigerator. It rose again, quiet, almost childlike, a breathy giggle that never reached full sound. I froze. Every muscle in my body tensed. It didn't belong here. There was no one else in the house. No reason for laughter to exist in that kind of silence. The water overflowed from the glass, spilling cold down my fingers, snapping me back into motion. I turned off the tap. Listen, the sound had stopped. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator remained, that low vibration that fills the gaps in silence. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Fatigue, maybe a trick of the mind. But then, a breath, soft, close, from the direction of the pantry. And with it, the laughter again, quieter this time, almost teasing, like it knew I was listening. It didn't echo like normal sound. It rolled, a low vibration that moved through the air, spreading along the walls, through the floorboard beneath my feet. I felt it more than I heard it, a tickle in the chest, a pressure in the ears. I turned toward the pantry. The door was slightly open, though I never leave it that way. The gap was thin, a sliver of black between pale wood. I could feel the draft seeping out, cold and dry, as if the air inside had been still for years. The laughter stopped again. Silence. Only the faint drip of the faucet now, and the soft hum in my ears. I stepped closer. The floor creaked once, and then it came again, but not from the pantry. From behind me, a single, sharp laugh, clear and hollow, echoing across the tiles. It didn't fade like normal sound. It just stopped, cut off mid-breath. I turned slowly. The kitchen looked exactly the same. Empty. Still, the only movement was a swing of the hanging light above the table. Barely moving, as if someone had brushed past it moments ago. I stood there for a long time, watching it sway. The air grew colder. My breath fogged faintly in front of me, and from somewhere beneath that pale glow, the laughter came again. So faint it barely existed. But this time, I could tell it wasn't distant. It was near, right beside me, a small, shivering giggle that brushed against my ear and crawled down my spine. I didn't move. Couldn't. The smell of damp earth filled the air, like wet soil, like something had been buried and disturbed. The laughter swelled for a moment, turning into a breathy exhale, as though whoever, or whatever it was, had leaned in too close. Then silence again, the kind that hurts to listen to. I backed away slowly, step by step. My hand brushed against the counter. The surface was damp. Condensation? No, the air was too cold for that. And then I saw it, a faint fog imprint on the metal, the outline of a small hand. I stared at it until my vision blurred, and as soon as I blinked, it was gone. The light above the table flickered once more. The shadows stretched across the floor, long, thin, and trembling. Something about them felt wrong, like they didn't belong to me. I turned toward the hallway. The darkness there seemed thicker than before. The hum of the refrigerator deepened into a low, steady tone, and beneath it, so faint it could almost be mistaken for air, was a whisper. Not words, just breath, and the faintest trace of laughter trying to form behind it. I left the kitchen light on that night, sat awake until dawn. The laughter didn't return, but every now and then when the house goes still, I can hear the air shifting, that same soft movement between the walls, like it's waiting. And once, just before falling asleep, I thought I heard again, right by my ear, a quiet giggle, barely human, fading into the dark. It was late, the kind of late where the air feels heavy, and the house seems to hold its breath. The rain had stopped hours ago, but everything still smelled of damp wood and earth. The windows fogged faintly in the chill. The clock ticked somewhere behind me, steady and distant. I sat on the couch with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the pale light of the TV flicker across the living room. It wasn't showing anything anymore, just quiet static, soft and gray, casting slow-moving shadows across the walls. That's when I noticed it. The chair. It sat across from me, angled slightly toward the center of the room. Old wood, a bit loose at the joints, the fabric still indented where someone had once sat. I'd always found comfort in it. It had belonged to my grandfather. It creaked when you leaned back, and the sound used to make me feel less alone. But tonight, something about it felt different. It faced me. I was sure it hadn't before. The chair had always been turned toward the window, a habit, I thought, from when my grandfather liked to sit and watch the rain. Now it was angled toward me, like it was watching. I tried to ignore it, told myself it must have been me earlier, dragging the blanket, bumping it without noticing. But a thought began to form, quiet and unwelcome. What if it hadn't been? I turned the TV off. The static vanished, and the silence that followed felt alive. The only thing I could hear was a faint hum of the fridge down the hall, and the slow rhythm of my own breathing. The chair stood still. Its shadow stretched across the rug, longer now, darker at the edges. The house felt colder, like the temperature had dropped all at once. I got up, walked over to it, and placed my hand on the top rail. Cold, colder than the rest of the room. The fabric smelled faintly of dust, and something else, something like damp soil. I pushed the chair back toward the window, where it belonged. Though it scraped against the floor, a slow, low drag that made my skin tighten. It faced the window again. Everything looked normal. I exhaled, walked back to the couch. Then, from behind me, a small creak. Not the floor, not the walls. The chair, the air around me thickened. I turned my head, slowly, just enough to see its outline. It was angled again, halfway between the window and me. I stared at it for a long time. Neither of us moved. The shadows pulsed softly in the still air. Then another creak, short, sharp, and the chair shifted, just a few inches, enough to make the sound of the floorboards strain beneath it. Now it faced the hallway, the dark one that led to bedrooms. The air turned colder still. I could see my breath faintly in the dim light. It sat there, pointed into the dark, like someone had just left it that way. Like someone invisible had stood up and walked down that hall. My pulse quickened. I didn't want to look down the corridor, but my eyes followed anyway. It was pitch black, no movement, No sound. But it felt wrong. Heavy, as if something had just gone still in there, waiting. I took a step toward the chair. The floor groaned beneath my foot. Another step. The air grew thicker. The smell of damp was stronger. And then, faintly, the sound of soft breathing. Not mine. It came from the hallway. Slow. Steady. Too close. I froze. The chair moved again. Barely an inch, but enough that its front legs lifted off the floor and dropped back down with a dull thud. I could feel the vibration through the wood beneath my feet. I backed away, my throat tight, my breath short. The silence after that sound was worse than the noise itself. Everything in the house waited. The air, the walls, the floor. Even the shadows seemed to lean forward, listening. And then a soft whisper fabric, like someone brushing past the doorway at the end of the hall. The chair didn't move again. It stayed perfectly still, facing the darkness. I waited for a long time, maybe an hour, maybe more. Eventually, I forced myself to move it back again. My hand shook as I pushed it into its corner, angled just right toward the window, away from the hall. I didn't look back as I went upstairs. Didn't glance at the doorway. Didn't breathe until I'd shut my bedroom door behind me. But even from there in the quiet above, I could hear it. A single creak, then another, slow, dragging, wood against floor. By the time the sound stopped, the air in my room had gone still again. But I knew it had moved. And in the morning, when I came downstairs, the chair was there in the center of the room, angled once more toward the dark hallway. It was late evening, the kind of quiet where even the air seems to hesitate. The house was dim, washed in that soft gray light that comes before the dark settles incompletely. I'd been brushing my teeth, half asleep, the faucet dripping in a slow rhythm that echoed through the small bathroom. The mirror was fogged from the shower I'd taken earlier. I could still feel the damp heat clinging to my skin, mixed with the faint chill of the tiles beneath my feet. Everything felt ordinary, safe, until it didn't. I wiped my hand across the mirror. The condensation cleared in one smooth streak, and that's when I saw it. A shape, behind me, pale, still, standing just inside the doorway. For a moment, my mind refused to understand. I blinked once, twice. It didn't move. My breath caught halfway out of my chest. The reflection was faint, like it didn't belong to the light in this world. Its face, or what should have been a face, was wrong. The skin too smooth. The features blurred, as if water had washed them away. Just a faint outline of eyes, and something that might have been a mouth, parted slightly, as though whispering. My hand was still pressed against the mirror, the glass cold beneath my fingertips. Every instinct told me not to turn around. But I did. The doorway was empty. Nothing there, only the faint smell of damp plaster and soap. When I looked back, the reflection was gone. The space behind me in the glass was just mine again. The small sink, the towels, the flickering overhead light. I told myself it had been a trick, a shadow from the hallway, something my tired mind invented. But the feeling didn't leave. The air had changed, heavier, somehow, and the faint hum of the light above the mirror grew louder. I turned it off. The hum stopped, but in the darkness, the silence pressed harder. I stepped out of the bathroom. The floorboards creaked under my feet, slow and soft, like someone breathing through the walls. I went to my room, closed the door, tried to read. But every time I glanced toward the dresser, toward the mirror above it, my stomach tightened. The moonlight from the window caught its edges, casting a faint shimmer across the glass. And for a second, I thought I saw movement again, just a flicker, like someone shifting behind me. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. But when I looked back, the figure was there again, closer now. I froze. My throat felt tight, my fingers gripping the blanket until they ached. The figure's shape rippled in the glass, like it was standing in water. The pale outline of its head tilted slightly, as though it was listening, and then its mouth began to move. No sound came out, just a slow parting of lips, forming shapes I couldn't understand. I wanted to look away, but my eyes wouldn't listen. Every breath I took felt like I was swallowing cold air. Then the glass shifted, just slightly, like something pressed against it from the other side. A hand, pale, wet-looking, its fingers long and thin. They spread across the inside of the mirror, leaving faint streaks of moisture. I stumbled backward, my pulse loud in my ears. The room around me warped, the shadows bending, stretching toward the dresser. The figure leaned forward, and for the briefest second, its eyes met mine. They weren't eyes. Not really. Just empty spaces, dark, bottomless holes where light went to die. Then it vanished. The mirror went still. The room was silent again. Only my reflection stared back, pale, shaking, breathing too fast. I forced myself closer, just to see, to be sure. The surface of the glass was cold again, smooth, dry. But as I leaned in, I noticed something faint right at the bottom edge. A smudge, like a print, 5 thin marks, as if a hand had been pressed there from the inside. I wiped it once. It didn't fade. Twice. Still there. I turned away then, unable to look any longer. The air felt wrong. Too still. Too aware. I unplugged the lamp beside the mirror, covered it with an old sheet, and sat down on the bed, staring at the floor until my breathing slowed. Eventually, I lay down, closed my eyes, tried to pretend it was over, but just before I drifted asleep, I heard it again, a faint breath close, just beside me. I opened my eyes. The mirror across the room glowed faintly in the moonlight, and for a heartbeat, just one, I saw my reflection blink. Even though I hadn't, the night felt heavier than usual, thicker. I'd turn off every light in the house, leaving only the faint orange glow from the street lamp outside. It bled to the curtains, painting thin lines of light across the walls. I sat on the couch, half wrapped in a blanket, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator down the hall. Everything was still, so still that I could hear my own heartbeat. It had been like this for weeks. The silence, the stillness that wasn't really still. Sometimes I thought I heard breathing, soft and steady, just beneath the rhythm of my own. That night, I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the whisper of the wind outside, the faint rustle of leaves against the window pane. But then, something brushed against my arm. It was gentle, too gentle to be an accident. A cold touch, like fingertips trailing across my skin, slow and deliberate. I froze. The blanket slipped from my shoulder, and the air bit the place it had touched. No one else was there. I knew that. Every door was locked, every window sealed. Still, my skin burned where the cold had been. I turned my head slowly, eyes adjusting to darkness. The room looked the same. The couch, the table, the hallway stretching into shadow. Nothing moved, but I could feel it, a faint hum in the air, like the space beside me was charged. I whispered, barely a breath, "Who's there?" The words felt strange leaving my mouth, as if they didn't belong in the room. No answer, just that same, still air, waiting. I tried to convince myself it was imagination, a muscle twitch, a breeze I hadn't noticed. But the air was heavy now, too thick for wind to pass through. And then it happened again, the same cold graze, across my wrist this time, slower. My heart stumbled. My breath caught somewhere in my throat. I could feel the weight of something beside me, not visible, but present, pressing faintly against the cushion. I didn't move, didn't even blink. The streetlight flickered outside, and the room dimmed for half a heartbeat. When the light returned, the cushion beside me had dipped slightly deeper, like someone had leaned closer. I could smell it now, something faint, like old dust and rain-soaked wood. The air trembled, and I heard it, a soft exhale right beside my ear. I stood up too fast. The blanket fell to the floor, and the air shifted again, as if whatever was there had moved back into the dark. The silence returned, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt aware. I took a few steps backward, my hands shaking. The cold followed, trailing up my spine, down my arms, lingering wherever I'd been touched. I went to the light switch, flipped it. Nothing. The bulb stayed dark. I tried again. Click, click. Still nothing. I could see the faintest reflection in the window, just enough to know I wasn't alone in that moment. A shape, faint and pale, standing a little behind me. But when I turned, The space was empty. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator, steady and distant. I whispered again, "I can feel you." The words barely existed. But something stirred in the room, like the air shivered in response. A soft chill brushed my hair, then the back of my neck. My chest tightened. I stepped backward, closer to the wall. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, a slow groan in the stillness. Then quiet. No breath, no hum, just silence. For a long time, I didn't move, didn't dare. And then, just as I began to think it was gone, something touched my hand. Cold, firmer this time, as if fingers had wrapped around mine. I didn't scream. Couldn't. The grip tightened, not painful, but insistent, like it didn't want me to leave. Then it let go. The air lightened. The pressure faded. The heaviness drained out of the room. I turned the light switch one more time. This time it flickered on. The couch was empty. The blanket crumpled on the floor. The cushion still indented. I stood there for a long time, just staring. Eventually, I sat back down, right where it had been. The cushion was cold, and though nothing touched me again, I couldn't shake the feeling that something still sat there, just close enough to reach out if it wanted to. I don't turn off the lights anymore, not since that night, because in the dark, something always remembers where I was sitting. It was close to midnight. The house had gone still, the kind of stillness that presses against the skin. Outside, the air hung heavy with rain. You could taste the metal in it, smell the wet earth through the cracks in the windows. I was the only one awake. Or at least, I thought I was. The hallway light was dim, a single bulb trembling at the end of the corridor. Its pale glow didn't reach far, just enough to brush against the closed doors. I remember moving slowly, bare feet against the cold wooden floor. Each step felt louder than it should have. There was a door halfway down the hall, the one that always stayed open, the one to the spare bedroom. That night it was closed. It shouldn't have been. I never shut it. No one did. I paused a few feet away, watching it from the corner of my eye. The light flickered again. The air felt wrong, thicker, like the house was holding its breath. I reached out my hand, not to touch it, just to test the space between. And before my fingers even brushed the handle, the latch clicked, a soft, sharp sound, like a throat clearing the silence. The door locked itself. I froze, my hand still suspended in the air. For a second, I thought I imagined it, but I saw the bolt shift, a quick metallic twitch, as if someone had turned the lock from the inside. I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing, just the quiet hum of rain against the windows. A slow drip somewhere down the hall. I stepped back. The air grew colder the farther I moved away. The handle trembled, barely, just enough to make the metal glint, like someone's hand rested on the other side. The light above me buzzed, then steadied. A faint hum filled the air. I waited, heart beating too close to my ears. The house made small sounds, timber creaking, pipes breathing. But this felt different. It felt alive. Something shifted behind the door, soft, a movement too gentle to be the house. I could hear it brushing against the wood, a slow drag, as if fingers traced the panels from the inside. I whispered again, "Who's in there?" My voice broke the stillness, but no voice answered. Only the quiet thud, a single low knock from the other side. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud, just deliberate. One, then silence. I felt it then, a cold draft seeping out through the bottom of the door. It curled around my ankles, slow and damp like breath. The smell that came with it was faint but wrong. Old wood, wet fabric, and something faintly metallic. I stepped closer again, slowly this time. Every instinct told me not to, but I had to see. The knob had stopped moving, but the metal still held a faint warmth, as if someone had been touching it just moments before. I turned it. It didn't budge. Completely locked. I pushed gently. The door barely shifted. Something resisted from the other side. Not weight, just presence. The silence deepened. It pressed on me. Then a faint scrape, like nails on wood, moving upward, higher, up the door, up toward the lock. And then it stopped. My breath caught. For a moment, I could feel it. Whatever was there, right behind that thin line of wood. Still, waiting. The bulb above me flickered once more. For less than a second, the hallway went black. And in that darkness, I heard a whisper, so faint I almost thought it came from inside my own head. "Don't!" The light returned. The door was still. No movement. No sound. I backed away slowly, eyes never leaving it. Halfway down the hall, I heard the click again, the lock turning. But this time it unlocked. The handle loosened. The air shifted. That heavy feeling lifted from my chest. I waited, watching. The door creaked open, just an inch. Darkness spilled out from the gap, thick and unmoving. Inside I could see nothing. No shape, no light, just a hollow quiet, like the air was gone from that room. I wanted to look, to step closer, but something in me refused. I turned away, walked back down the hall, every step deliberate, each one echoing louder than the last. Behind me, the door creaked again, slowly, as if closing itself. Then the faintest click, locked once more. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after that, listening to the rain, trying to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But when I finally went back to check, hours later, the door was open, wide, the air inside freezing cold. And on the inside of the wood, just below the lock, 5 faint scratches ran downward, as if someone had tried to reach me before it changed its mind. It was late, past midnight, the kind of hour when the walls breathe and every sound feels too close. The house was quiet, only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock above the sink. I was sitting in the living room, a single lamp glowing beside me. Its light was weak, gold against the gray shadows that gathered in the corners. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the window still held its ghost. A faint chill moved through the room, curling along the floorboards, cold enough to sting my feet. That's when the phone rang. The old landline on the wall, the one no one used anymore. Its shrill tones split the silence clean in half. I froze. It kept ringing, slow, steady, mechanical. 4 rings, 5, 6, each one sharper than the last, cutting through the stillness of the house. I stood up slowly. The air felt heavier as I crossed the room. With every step, it was like the walls leaned closer. I lifted the receiver. For a second, there was nothing, just a long, hollow breath on the line. Then static, soft at first, like the whisper of wind through an empty room. Then deeper, rougher, alive. It filled my ear like a wave, fading and swelling, as if someone were breathing just behind it. I whispered, "Hello?" The static shifted, a faint crackle, something moving inside it. "Hello," I said again. My voice sounded too loud against the hum. Then something whispered back. It was buried in the static, so faint it barely existed. A syllable, maybe my name. I froze. The hairs on my arms lifted. My hand shook against the receiver. The voice came again. Just a single breath of sound, not words, just shape. It felt close, like it was speaking directly into my ear. And then the line went dead. The silence that followed was too clean, too sudden. I stood there for a long moment, still holding the phone, listening to the nothing. When I hung it up, the click echoed through the room. It sounded wrong. Too loud. I turned back toward the chair. The lamp flickered. Once, twice, then held steady. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a wrong number, old wiring, static. But when I sat back down, the air had changed. The hum of the refrigerator had stopped. The clock on the wall was still ticking, but slower now. Each tick dragged like a heartbeat underwater. I stared at the phone, waiting, listening. It didn't ring again, not for a while. Then it did, a single ring, short, sharp. I didn't move. Another ring followed, a fraction longer. Then another, each one closer together, faster. By the 4th, I picked up again, my hand trembling this time. Static, only static. But this time, beneath it, I could hear something else. A rhythm, like soft breathing, or a slow, muffled laugh. I pressed the receiver tighter to my ear. Who is this? The static pulsed, then broke apart, like someone was moving close to the phone on the other end. I could hear faint shuffling, a small scrape, and then whispering, not words, just a pattern of them. Too quiet to make sense of. Then, through the hiss, a single, clear whisper, right against my ear. "Don't hang up." I dropped the receiver. It swung against the wall, the cord twisting like a snake. The static still spilled from the speaker, louder now, as if the voice had forced its way through. I took a step back. Then another. The lamp flickered again. The light dimmed to a dull orange, and in that weak glow, I thought I saw something, a faint reflection in the window glass. A figure, pale, still, standing just behind me. I turned. The room was empty. The static stopped. The phone hung silent, its cord swaying slightly, as if touched a moment ago. I backed toward the hallway. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. For a while, I stood there, listening. Then, the phone rang again. Once, the sound made the whole house tremble. I didn't move this time. I couldn't. The ring echoed once more, then cut off mid-tone. Silence, the kind that fills your ears until it hums. I forced myself to step closer, to reach for the receiver again. It felt warm. I lifted it. No static, no voice, just breathing. Steady, human. I waited. Then it spoke again, quiet, calm, but unmistakably close. "I can see you now." The line went dead. This time, I didn't hang up. I just listened to the silence. And from somewhere deeper in the house, far beyond the walls, a phone started ringing again. It was almost 2 a.m, the kind of quiet where even the walls seemed to hold their breath. The night had settled heavy on the house. No wind, no passing cars, just still air and the soft ticking of the clock above the stove. I sat by the window with a cup of cold tea. The lamp beside me flickered now and then, casting thin veins of light across the floor. Outside, the world looked frozen. The trees stood black against a pale wash of sky. No stars, no moon, just a faint gray of winter light, spilling to the clouds like breath. I remember shifting in my chair, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The glass beside me was cold, cold enough to sting when I touched it. That's when I saw them. 2 small lights, far at first, then closer. They floated above the edge of the yard, round, still, almost glowing. At first I thought they were reflections, maybe from a passing car. But the street outside was empty, silent. The eyes didn't move. They just hovered, fixed, watching. I leaned closer to the window, the glass fogging beneath my breath. The lights blinked, slowly once, then widened. My heart slowed. Every sound in the house seemed to fade away. Even the clock had stopped ticking. I told myself it was an animal, a stray cat, something explainable. But they were too high, too still, too human. I tried to look away, but my reflection held me there, my own face staring back, and behind it, those pale eyes. They looked brighter now, almost white, like frost-catching light that wasn't there. I stood, moved closer to the glass. The air pressed colder against my skin, the kind of cold that bites from the inside. I could see the faint outline now. Shoulders, a shadow, something standing just beyond the window frame. Not moving, not breathing. The eyes never blinked again. I whispered, "Who's there?" My voice cracked in the quiet. It sounded small, like it didn't belong to me. The eyes didn't answer. They only glowed brighter, until they blurred the edges of the glass. And then the light dimmed. Not gone, just softer, fading back into the dark. I felt my chest tighten. Every instinct told me to step back, to close the curtains. But I couldn't move. Something about the way they stared. It held me there, like a hand on my shoulder I couldn't see. Then a faint sound, a rustle from outside, slow, deliberate, like something brushing against the siding of the house. I leaned forward, trying to see past my own reflection. The yard was still empty. No wind, no branches moving. But the eyes had shifted. They were closer, level now with mine. Only a pane of glass between us. I could feel the chill radiating from it, sharp against my fingertips. And for one long moment, I thought I saw the outline of a face. Pale skin, thin lips, and those eyes, too wide, too hollow. The figure stayed there, still as a shadow pinned by the light. Then, suddenly, it tilted its head, slowly, almost curious. My stomach dropped. I stumbled back, the chair leg catching on the rug. The lamp flickered again and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I could still see the faint glow of the eyes through the window. Two white orbs floating in the dark, waiting. I backed toward the hallway, my breath sharp in my throat. Then, without warning, the eyes moved, downward, as if the figure crouched. I froze. Every nerve screamed. And then nothing. The glow was gone. I waited, heart pounding, the silence pressing heavy against my ears. I forced myself to inch back to the window. The yard was empty, only the wet grass glinting in the faint skylight. I reached the curtains, but before I could close them, something brushed the glass. A faint, dragging touch. Cold lines traced across the window pane, like fingertips drawing from the outside. My breath caught. I watched the fog of it bloom against the glass and vanish. The marks remained, long, uneven streaks, and in the center of them, two small ovals, eye-shaped, pressed from the other side. I stood there for what felt like hours. The marks never faded. Even when morning came and light filled the room, they were still there, pale impressions half melted into the glass. I wiped at them once. They didn't move. Only when I looked closer, I realized they weren't on the outside at all. They were on the inside. It was late, the kind of late where even the crickets had gone quiet. The house felt heavier than usual that night. Thick air, walls holding the cold. I sat on the couch, reading beneath the weak glow of a single lamp. Every few seconds the bulb hummed, a faint, uneasy sound that reminded me how alone I was. Outside, the trees leaned against the wind. Bare branches scraped the siding in soft, tired movements. Everything was still, until I heard it dot a step. Right above me, IT wasn't loud, not sharp, just soft, like a heel pressing gently against old wood. I froze, my eyes drifting up to the ceiling. The air in the room changed. It pressed closer, colder. Another step followed, then another, slow, even, measured. The attic. It came from the attic, but there was no way anyone could be up there. I hadn't opened that hatch in months. The light from the lamp flickered once, and I almost wished it would go out, because the silence after each step was worse than the sound itself. I listened, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped, and the quiet that followed was thick enough to feel. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, faintly, I heard it again. Step, pause, step. Each one landed in the same spot, right above where I sat. I stood slowly, the blanket slipping from my knees to the floor. The ceiling boards creaked. Something shifted up there, like weight being dragged across dust. I told myself it could be the house settling. Old wood, cold air, but deep down, I knew the rhythm was too human, too intentional. I reached for my phone, though I wasn't sure what I'd even say if I called someone. The screen stayed black, dead. I stared at it, the reflection of my own pale face staring back. And then I heard it again, this time faster, steps moving across the length of the attic, then stopping right above the doorway. I turned toward the hall, expecting something, but it was empty, just a faint shimmer of light bending off the picture frames. The air smelled like dust and cold iron, and something else, something faintly sweet, like rotting flowers. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move toward the hallway. Every board beneath me groaned, the sound climbing up into the ceiling. I could almost imagine the thing above me listening too, matching my pace. When I reached the end of the hallway, the pull cord for the attic hung there, swaying gently. The movement didn't make sense. There wasn't any draft. Still, it rocked, slowly back and forth, like it was breathing. I hesitated. My fingers brushed the string. The wood above me groaned again, and the footsteps resumed. Circling now. It was moving in a slow loop, following the shape of the ceiling. My heart thudded quietly in my chest. I pulled the cord. The attic door dropped open with a dull thud. A small ladder folded down. The space above was dark. Pitch black, except for a faint glimmer of light spilling from between the boards. I could smell the dust before I climbed. Dry, stale, cold. Each rung creaked under my weight. When my head rose above the hatch, I stopped breathing. The air up there felt wrong, colder than the rest of the house, and thick, like it hadn't been touched in years. I whispered into the dark, "Is someone there?" Silence. The question hung, heavy and unanswered. Then a soft sound, not footsteps now, but a shift, like fabric brushing wood. I squinted into the dark, trying to let my eyes adjust. Shapes began to take form. Boxes, old trunks, the outline of a chair in the corner. I waited, and then a creak right behind me. Not above, not ahead, behind. I turned too fast, my foot slipping against the rung. For a split second, I thought I saw something move, a shape low to the ground, darting into the far corner. I blinked hard, but it was gone. Only silence remained. I stepped back down, closing the attic door as quietly as I could. The moment it clicked shut, the air seemed to ease. The house settled again, like nothing had happened. I stood there in the hallway, hands trembling slightly. But just as I turned toward the bedroom, I heard it once more. A single step, right above me, slow, heavy, then another, and another. This time they didn't stop. The footsteps moved again, straight across the ceiling, until they reached the top of the stairs. And then, silence. I waited for something to follow. A door creak, a breath, nothing. But I could feel it. Something standing just above the landing, listening. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that listens back. I didn't move for the rest of the night. I just sat in the chair beneath the flickering lamp, watching the ceiling, waiting for the next step that never came. But in the morning, when I finally stood, I noticed something new. A thin line of dust had fallen from the ceiling, right where I'd been sitting, and in it were prints, small, bare footprints, facing down. The rain had been falling for hours, soft at first, then heavier, the kind that fills the air with a low, steady hum. I was sitting by the window, watching the drops trace slow lines down the glass. It was late, the kind of late where the walls feel too close, where your thoughts start whispering louder than the world outside. The power had flickered twice, and the lamp beside me buzzed in uneven rhythms. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Every silence carried weight. I should have gone to bed, but something in me stayed still, listening. The house made its usual night sounds, with settling, pipes ticking, the wind pushing faintly at the shutters. But beneath it, there was something else, a faint distortion, like a voice caught inside static. At first, I thought it was my imagination, that strange trick your ears play when you've been awake too long. But then I heard it again, closer, more deliberate, a whisper, low, uneven. It said my name. I froze. The sound seemed to come from behind me, but when I turned, there was only the pale glow of the lamp and the quiet shiver of rain on glass. My breath came shallow. I tried to focus, but my heart had begun to drown out the rest of the world. Then the whisper again, clearer this time, dragging each syllable like someone speaking through water. It didn't sound human, but it knew me. I could feel it, each word reaching through the air and touching something cold inside my chest. I whispered into the room, my voice barely holding together. "Who's there?" The house breathed. Nothing else. But then a response. Not a word this time, a repetition. The same question, but not in my voice. "Who's there?" It echoed softly, warped, as it played through a dying speaker. I felt my skin tighten. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. The voice came again, quieter, but closer. It began whispering things I'd never said aloud. Little thoughts, hidden fears, the kind that only live inside your head. It spoke about the nights I couldn't sleep, and the faces I thought I saw in dreams. The empty chair across the room that I always avoided looking at. I wanted to move, to run, but I couldn't. Each word pressed deeper, as if it was pulling those thoughts from me, feeding on them. The air around me shifted, a faint vibration, like something heavy humming just beneath the floorboards. I covered my ears, but the whisper didn't stop. It was inside now, behind the bones, "Why do you keep pretending?" it murmured. "Why do you think you're alone?" I shook my head, eyes burning. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The voice already knew. It began to change, splitting, layered tones twisting together, rising and falling in strange, broken patterns. It sounded almost like laughter, almost like breathing. The room around me felt thinner, walls stretching, corners darkening. I tried to focus on the rain again, on the world beyond the glass. But the reflection there wasn't right. My face, it moved, even when I didn't. The mouth opened slightly, and a distorted whisper came again, this time from the reflection. "I'm not in the walls." Pause. "I'm in you." I stumbled back, the chair legs scraping against the wooden floor. The lamp's light faltered, then went out completely. The whisper grew louder in the dark. Sharp now, urgent. It spoke faster, words blending together, mimicking my own breathing, my own heartbeat. Every syllable felt alive. "Wet. Close." I reached for the switch, fingers trembling, but the plastic felt warm. Too warm. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust. Then, without warning, the voice stopped. Silence. Heavy and perfect. Only the rain remained. A soft curtain of sound between me and whatever had been here. I waited, frozen in that silence, expecting another whisper, another breath, but there was nothing. Eventually, I found the courage to turn the light back on. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. Everything looked normal again. The chair, the window, the pale reflection staring back. But the glass was fogged now, like someone had leaned close and exhaled. And written in that faint, fading mist, just above where my face met its reflection, were 3 words. Still listening now. The air felt heavier that morning. Still, like the house was holding its breath. Light seeped through the curtains, thin and pale, touching the corners of the room that I hadn't looked at yet. Something was different. I could feel it before I could see it. The clock ticked, steady and slow, but it wasn't where it should be. It sat closer to the edge of the shelf now, angled toward the door. I frowned, tried to remember if I had moved it, but I hadn't. I never did. The blanket at the foot of the bed was folded. Neat, precise. I don't fold it like that. For a long time, I just stood there, listening to the faint hum of the morning. The refrigerator downstairs, the drip of the bathroom tap, the hollow creak of the hallway floor. Everything was ordinary, except it wasn't. In the living room, the couch had shifted slightly. Not much, just a few inches, but enough to break the perfect shape left in the carpet. The coffee table had turned, too, barely noticeable, like it had been nudged in someone's passing. The curtains were open wider than I'd left them, and the chair by the window, the old wooden one I never sat in, was now facing inward, toward the room. It hadn't been like that last night. I was sure. I whispered to myself, half a comfort, half a test of the silence. Maybe I just forgot. But I hadn't forgotten. I never forgot. Something inside the house had moved. Carefully, quietly. While I slept, I walked through each room, slow, bare feet pressing into the cool floorboards. The smell of dust was faint in the air, mixed with something else. A hint of cold, like the scent that lingers after someone opens a door on a winter night. The hallway mirror caught my reflection. My face looked pale, distant. Behind me, the coat rack leaned slightly, as if brushed by a shoulder that wasn't there. The kitchen was the same, almost. The chairs had been pulled out just a little, each one evenly spaced like a pattern. The bowl on the counter had moved to the other side of the sink. The spoon beside it was angled toward the window. I stared at it longer than I should have, because the longer I looked, the more it felt deliberate, like someone had stood there, thinking, arranging, observing. I felt the weight of eyes, but the house was empty. I tried to shake it off, tell myself it was small, insignificant, maybe vibrations from a truck passing by. Maybe I'd done it without realizing. But the truth settled quietly beneath the thoughts. Heavy, unmoving. Something had walked through here. I could almost trace its path. From the living room to the kitchen, down the hall, to the door of my room. The doorknob was cold when I touched it, colder than the air around it. I opened it slowly. Inside, The bedspread had shifted again, just a ripple across the surface, as if a hand had brushed it while passing. The lamp beside the bed was turned slightly toward the pillow, like it had been watching. A quiet unease crawled through me, the kind that grows deeper, not louder. I stepped back into the hallway, heart thudding softly. Every object in the house felt aware now, placed, arranged. I moved the chair back toward the window, straightened the table, closed the curtains to their old angle. For a moment, it looked right again, still, but as I stood there, a thought crept in, slow, careful. If something had walked here, if it had touched these things, where was it now? I turned toward the end of the hall. The attic door hung slightly open. It shouldn't have been. I never opened it. A draft slid down from the crack above, carried with the faint smell of dust and something dry. Old wood, old air. I stood beneath it, listening. The silence was thick, stretching thin between each heartbeat. Then came the smallest shift. A creak, soft, deliberate, from somewhere above. Something had moved again, not walking, not rushing, just adjusting its place. I backed away, watching that thin line of darkness above me. The air felt heavy, like the house was thinking. I waited for another sound, but it never came. Only stillness, only the quiet shape of rooms that no longer felt like mine. When I finally turned to leave, I caught one last glimpse into the living room. The chair, the one I'd turned toward the window. It wasn't facing the glass anymore. It was turned back, toward me. It started late one night, when the house was still and the air hung heavy with quiet. A low hum, barely there at first, like the vibration of something buried deep within the walls. I thought it was a refrigerator, or maybe the old heater, waking from sleep, but it didn't fade. It lingered. A thin vibration pressed through the floorboards, through the soles of my feet, through my chest. The hum seemed to live inside the air itself, a sound you couldn't quite hear, but could feel beneath your ribs. I walked from room to room, barefoot, each step soft against the cold wood. The sound followed, subtle, persistent. In the kitchen, the windows trembled slightly in their frames. The glasses in the cupboard quivered, a faint shimmer of contact. I pressed my palm to the counter. It was shaking, not violently, just enough to be alive. I listened closely. It wasn't mechanical, not electric. It was deeper, organic, like something breathing beneath the house. The clock ticked unevenly now. The rhythm of the hum had changed it, warped it, pulling each second out longer than the last. I tried to trace where it came from. The basement, maybe, but the air near the door there felt thick. Colder. Wrong. I stood in front of it, hand hovering over the knob. The hum pulsed beneath the wood, slow, steady, alive. It vibrated through my fingers, up my arm, into my jaw. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on rust. And underneath it, a hint of dust, old air unmoved for years. I stepped back. Everywhere I went, the walls seemed to sigh with it. Even the silence between breaths carried that same low vibration. I turned off the lights, listened again. The darkness made it worse. Without sight, the sound took form, a soft body pressing close, curling through corners, sliding under doors. It was inside everything now. I could feel it in the glass of water on the table, in the wood of the chair, in the skin on my arms. I whispered to no one, "Stop." But it didn't. The hum answered, just slightly louder, as if it had heard me. My throat tightened. The house felt smaller, the air heavier. I covered my ears. The sound didn't fade. It was beneath the skin now, threaded through the pulse of my heart. Each beat echoed it, matched it, a rhythm not my own. The hum climbed, barely perceptible, but enough to rattle a picture frame on the wall. It tilted slowly, like someone had brushed past it. I froze, watched it move, watched it stop. The vibration deepened, turning the quiet into something almost alive. It began to form a pattern, a rise, a pause, a fall, breathing. I turned toward the window. The glass trembled faintly. Fog forming near the edges of the night outside was still. There was movement in the reflection. Not mine, not entirely. Just a shadow near the back of the room. Faint, elongated, shifting slightly with each pulse of the hum. I didn't move. The air pressed tighter. The vibration deepened again. The floor groaned beneath me. It felt like something underneath was pushing upward, testing the weight of the house. Testing me. I whispered again, voice thin, fragile. Please stop. The hum paused. For a moment, the silence was unbearable. Too thick, too complete. And then it answered. A single thrum, low and deliberate, rolled through the walls. Once, twice, then steady again. Almost patient. The shadow and the reflection didn't move anymore. It stood perfectly still, watching. My breath shook, fogging the cold glass. I turned, slowly, the way you do when you already know you shouldn't. Nothing was there, just the empty shape of the room, humming quietly in its bones. I backed away until my legs hit the edge of the couch. The vibration in the floor had softened again, settling into a steady pulse beneath me, almost comforting, almost like a heartbeat, but not mine. I sat there until morning, eyes open, watching the light creep across the walls. The hum never stopped. It only quieted, just enough to hide behind the noises of the day. Sometimes I can still feel it, in the floor, in the air, in the stillness between words. It's faint now, but it's always there, waiting for silence, waiting for me to listen again. It started with a feeling, a quiet pull at the edge of my attention, like being watched. It was late, past midnight. The house sat still, wrapped in a thin layer of fog that pressed against the glass. The lamps were dim. The air tasted cold, like metal and rain. I was reading or pretending to. The pages blurred after a while. My eyes kept drifting to window. Something was different outside. I couldn't say what, just a shift, a small disturbance in the stillness. The curtains moved slightly, though the air was still. I leaned forward. The glass caught the faint reflection of my face, and behind it, something darker. A shape. It stood at the edge of the yard, where the trees met the light from the porch. Still, too still. My heart pressed against my ribs, slow and heavy. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. But when I looked again, it was gone. Only the fog, rolling gently over the grass, breathing against the glass. I told myself it was nothing. My mind was tired, the kind of tired that makes shadows move when they shouldn't. But then the feeling didn't fade. It grew, the weight of eyes pressing against the back of my neck, the faint hum of silence tightening around me. I turned off the lamp. The room sank into dark. Outside, the fog glowed faintly in the moonlight, a pale gray sea where the world seemed to end. For a moment, it was peaceful, empty. Then movement, a figure, at the same place in the yard, standing just beyond the reach of the light. It wasn't walking. It wasn't swaying, just watching. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the fog, a shadow of a tree, a pattern of light. But as I stared, the longer I focused, the clearer it became. Tall, thin, shoulders slightly hunched forward, head tilted. The kind of posture that says it's looking right at you. I felt my breath hitch. My reflection in the glass looked pale and unreal. The shape behind it didn't move. I reached for the curtain. My fingers brushed the fabric, and it shifted, not the curtain, the figure. It turned, slightly like it knew I'd seen it. Then it was gone. The space it had filled seemed darker now, like the fog had thickened to hide the spot. I waited. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Nothing, but the air didn't ease. It felt charged, like the quiet just before a storm. I closed the curtain slowly, hands trembling. The fabric whispered against the sill. Behind it, the faintest shape of movement, as if something leaned close on the other side of the glass. I stepped back, heart pounding in silence. I could almost hear it breathing. Not loud, just soft enough to fill the space between sounds. The wood of the floor creaked under my weight. Each step backward made it louder. I whispered to myself, "Don't look." But I did. The curtain shifted again, this time outward, as if something brushed past it. The window pane shivered faintly. A line of fog clung to the glass, tracing what looked like the shape of a hand. Fingers, long, thin, trailing down before fading. I couldn't breathe. The hum of the house, the faint buzz of electricity, seemed to stop all at once. Everything just stilled. The silence felt wrong. Heavy, alive, and then, from the hallway behind me, a floorboard sank. Slow pressure, like someone stepping carefully, barefoot. I turned, nothing. Only shadow, stretching toward the living room. The curtain stopped moving. The handprint was gone, but I knew it was still there. Outside, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the wall opposite the window, watching the faint glow of dawn crawl across the curtains. When I finally pulled them open, the yard was empty. No footprints in the grass. No sign of anyone ever standing there. Only the faint outline of breath on the glass, as if something had leaned close in the dark and watched me watching it. And even now, when the fog rolls in, the night grows quiet. I can feel the same weight, the same slow gaze waiting just beyond the glass. Never gone, just patient, just watching. It began on a night like any other. Cold air pressed through the cracks of the old house. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the walls still breathed with dampness. The clock ticked quietly. Each second stretched thin, like a string pulled too tight. I was half asleep when I saw it. A darker shape in the corner of the room, where the closet stood. At first, I thought it was the open door, a fold of shadow bent by the light from the hall. But the door was closed. I remember that clearly. I had shut it before lying down. I always do. The faint glow from the streetlight reached through the curtains, spilling across the floor in uneven lines. That's when I noticed the shadow didn't match. It wasn't the shape of the door or the coats hanging inside. It was tall, too tall, narrow shoulders, a thin outline that stretched upward, its head brushing against the frame. I stared, waiting for it to shift, to melt back into the dark like all tricks of the mind eventually do. But it didn't. It stayed, still, watching. My throat tightened. The air felt heavy, like the weight of the house had settled on my chest. I didn't move at first, just listened. The faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the creak of wood contracting in the cold. And beneath all that, a soft, slow rustling. From inside the closet, I sat up, blanket sliding off my arms, skin prickling in the chill. The rustling stopped. The shadow didn't. It stood there, like a smear of darkness too thick for the light to touch. I whispered something. I don't remember what. A question, maybe my own name. No answer. The air between us felt alive, like it was breathing. I swung my legs over the bed, each step toward the closet heavier than the last. The floor groaned quietly beneath me. Halfway there, a faint smell reached me, musty, old wood mixed with something colder, like wet stone. My hand hovered near the handle. The metal was cold enough to sting. The shadow didn't move, but I could feel it, leaning closer. For a second, I thought I saw it blink, not with eyes, with shape. Its outline flickered, shivering like static under dim light. I pulled the door open. Nothing, just a narrow strip of coats, the stacked boxes at the bottom, and the quiet smell of dust. The shadow was gone, but the feeling wasn't. It lingered in the space it had filled, as if the air still held its weight. I closed the door slowly, stepped back. The room felt wrong. Empty, but not. I went back to bed, pulling the blanket higher. The silence grew thicker, a living thing crawling through every corner. When I turned onto my side, I could see the closet door again. A faint line of light traced its edge. I stared at it until my eyes ached, until I couldn't tell if I was awake anymore. Then softly it creaked, just once. The door hadn't moved, but the sound, it came from inside. My skin went cold, every nerve waiting, listening. And then a shift, a small, quiet movement behind the wood, like fabric brushing against wood, like something rearranging itself in the dark. I didn't move again that night, didn't breathe too loud, didn't blink. I watched that door until the sky outside turned pale, and morning crept across the room. When I finally opened it again, the air inside felt different, cooler, empty, but in the dust on the floor, beneath the hanging coats, there was a faint mark, like a footprint, dragged slightly backward. And on the inside of the door, just below the handle, a smudge, dark, tall, almost the shape of a hand. I cleaned it off, closed the door again. That night, I left the lamp on, just to be sure. But light doesn't help, because sometimes when I wake in the quiet hours before dawn, I see it again, that same tall shadow, waiting where the light doesn't reach. It never moves, never speaks. It just waits. And when I blink, when I gather the courage to look closer, it's gone, leaving only that faint cold smell, like stone after rain, and the quiet weight of something that still hasn't really left. It was late evening, the kind of quiet that presses against the walls. Outside, the sky had already turned a deep, muted blue. The house felt heavy. Still, every small sound carried too far. I sat in the living room, a single lamp glowing beside the old couch. Its light was warm, soft enough to make the edges of the room blur. The air smelled faintly of dust and rain. Somewhere the clock ticked, steady and calm. I should have gone to bed, but something kept me there, a feeling maybe like the house was waiting for something. When it started, it was small. The light dimmed, not all at once, just a slow fade, as if the bulb were breathing out. I looked up. The cord above the lampshade trembled slightly, though the air was still. I waited for the flicker, the return to normal, but it didn't come. Instead, the light dimmed again. The corners of the room deepened, the shapes of the furniture melting into the dark. The silence grew thicker with it, wrapping around everything. My pulse moved slow in my throat. I whispered to myself, a small sound, too soft to fill the room. The light dimmed once more, then steadied, weak and pale. I thought maybe the bulb was dying. Old wiring. Something simple. Something explainable. But then the other lamp, the one across the room, flickered too. Once, twice. Then it joined the first, glowing faintly, as though something was swallowing the light. The air changed. Cooler. Thicker. The quiet hum that usually lived in the house. The refrigerator. The faint buzz of electricity was gone. Everything had stopped. Even my breathing felt loud. I stood up. My hand brushed the back of the couch, the fabric rough and cold under my fingertips. The walls looked wrong in the fading light. Too far away, too flat. I moved toward the hallway. But the moment I did, the lights dimmed again. Now only a faint circle of gold remained around me, like I was standing in the last safe part of the room. I could barely see the shelves now, only the outlines, the glint of a picture frame. And in that dim glow, something shifted, just beyond the far edge of the light. A slow movement, not enough to see clearly, but I felt it, like the darkness itself was leaning forward. I froze. The air in my throat stayed there, caught halfway. The lamp buzzed faintly, a trembling sound, as if it was struggling to stay alive. I whispered, "Please don't." It dimmed again. The last light sank across the floor, pulling the shadows longer, deeper. Everything went still. For a long time, I just stood there, staring into the dark. The faintest outlines of the windows glowed with moonlight, enough to see the shapes of furniture, the table, the chair, and something else. Something that hadn't been there before. A tall shape near the far wall, motionless, almost blending in. I blinked hard. The outline didn't move, but as my eyes adjusted, it seemed to grow taller, or maybe closer. My heart felt cold in my chest. I couldn't hear it beating anymore. The light behind me pulsed once, a weak flash like a dying breath. And in that flicker, the shape was gone. I turned toward the switch on the wall. My fingers found the cold plastic. I flipped it once, twice. Nothing. The air hummed faintly now, not from the lamps, from somewhere deeper, inside the walls. A low vibration, steady, like a whisper too quiet to understand. It made my teeth ache. I stepped back, but the floor felt softer beneath me, almost like it was breathing. Then, from behind me, a tiny click. The lamp, it glowed again, dim but enough to see. Everything was still in place. The couch, the shelves, the frame on the table. But the door to the hallway was open, just an inch, wide enough for the dark to spill through. I stared at it for a long time. The light hummed quietly beside me. Then it faded again, slowly this time, as though something on the other side of that door was pulling away, draining it from the room. The hum deepened, my vision blurred, and for a moment, in the reflection of the window across from me, I thought I saw something move in the doorway. Not a figure, not even a shape, just the sense of something there, breathing, listening. The lamp went out, the house fell into silence, and all that remained was the faint, invisible vibration in the walls. A low, steady breath that matched my own. Until it didn't, it was late, past midnight, maybe closer to 2. The kind of hour when even the house feels asleep. I sat in the living room, wrapped in the faint glow of the television. The sound was low, barely a whisper, just enough to keep the silence from feeling alive. The air felt heavy that night, too still, too cold for late autumn. I remember pulling the blanket closer around my shoulders. It smelled faintly of detergent and something older, like dust that had been hiding in the corners too long. The clock ticked softly behind me. Each second dragged a little longer than the last. The television flickered, a quiet flash that washed the walls in pale blue. For a moment, the reflection on the glass looked wrong, like someone else was sitting behind me. I blinked. It was gone. I told myself I was tired, that my eyes were playing tricks. But even as I leaned back, I could feel something different about the air. It wasn't still anymore. It was moving, very slightly, as though the space around me had begun to breathe. I turned the volume lower, listening without meaning to. There was no wind, no hum from the heater, no reason for the draft that brushed across the back of my neck. It was faint at first, barely there, a soft chill that could have been anything. But then it came again, colder, longer, like someone had leaned close behind me, just enough for their breath to find my skin. My chest locked up. I didn't move. The blanket slipped slightly off my shoulder. I felt the air settle where it had been. Still cold, still there. I turned my head, slow, just enough to see the space behind me. Nothing, only the shadow of the lamp on the wall, the empty chair near the window, the quiet shape of the clock. But I couldn't shake it, the feeling that something was standing right there, just past where my eyes could reach. I stared into that emptiness for a long time. Then, carefully, I looked back at the television. The screen had frozen. Static flickered across it, casting faint white light over the room. And in that shifting light, something moved across the glass reflection. It wasn't clear, just a shadow, a blur that passed behind my chair. I turned sharply. Again, nothing. Only the slow sway of the curtains by the window. But the window was closed. I could feel my pulse in my throat now. Slow, heavy beats that didn't match the stillness around me. I whispered to myself. A word that wasn't really a word. A kind of plea to the dark. That's when I felt it again. Right on my neck. Cold. Wet. Too close. It stayed for longer this time, hovering just beside my ear, like a breath drawn in slow, and let out even slower. Every muscle in me locked. I didn't dare breathe back. The clock stopped ticking. The static cut to silence. And for a heartbeat, I swore I could hear something else. A faint, low sound, like someone trying to whisper through water. It was right behind me. I stood up too fast. The blanket fell to the floor with a soft thud. My knees almost gave way. The room looked different now. Colder, longer, as though the shadows had grown teeth. The lamp beside the couch flickered. Once, twice, then steadied, casting a pale circle of safety around me. I stayed in that light for what felt like forever. My breath came in short, uneven pulls. Each exhale turned to mist. Inside the house, I took one step toward the hallway, and the lamp dimmed again. That's when I saw it, the reflection in the glass of the picture frame on the wall. Not clear enough to name, not human enough to understand, just a shape, leaning close to where I had been sitting, its head tilted, as if it had been watching me the whole time. The lamp flickered again, and the shape was gone. I stood there, my fingers trembling against the cold air, the taste of metal sharp on my tongue. The television came back to life on its own, the image rolling, no sound, only that pale, empty flicker of movement. I looked toward the chair again, still empty, but the blanket I'd dropped had moved, just a little, as though something had stepped around it. The air behind me stirred once more. A slow, deliberate exhale, colder than before. I didn't turn this time. I couldn't. The lamp hummed faintly beside me, its light growing thinner by the second. And just before it went out, I heard it, a whisper, low, broken, so close it brushed the edge of my ear. My name, then silence, and the dark pressed in, soft, patient, waiting for me to breathe again. It was almost morning, that strange gray hour before the sun decides if it wants to rise. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind outside seemed to be holding its breath. I sat on the edge of the couch, half awake, half afraid to move. The events of the night still clung to me. The lights that faded, the cold breath on my neck, the shadow that never quite disappeared. I thought it was over, that maybe I'd imagined all of it, that maybe the silence meant safety. But silence can lie. The air felt different, heavier somehow, like it was pressing against my skin. I glanced toward the hallway. The door at the end, the one that always stayed shut, was open just a little. A sliver of darkness spilled into the light from the living room. It didn't move. It just waited. My throat felt dry. I could taste dust and something faintly metallic. I stood slowly, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The lamp hummed beside me, its light trembling like a pulse. I want to close that door. Just close it and make the house small again, safe again. But each step I took toward it felt wrong. The air seemed to stretch between me and the door, thick and cold, like walking through water. Halfway down the hallway, I stopped. Something brushed my shoulder. Soft, barely there, like fingertips tracing the edge of my sleeve. I turned, but the space behind me was empty, only the faint outline of furniture half swallowed by the dark. I tried to steady my breathing, but every inhale carried a strange rhythm, a whisper beneath my own breath. Not words at first, just the sound of someone trying to speak and not being able to, then clear enough to freeze me. Leave. The words slid against my ear, so close I felt the warmth it fade into my skin. I spun around, searching the empty room. No one, just that open door at the end of the hall. Waiting, my hand was shaking now. Every instinct told me to run, to grab my keys, to leave the house behind. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I whispered back. A single word I wish I hadn't. Why? The whisper answered immediately, not from far away, from right beside me. Because it's awake. The lamp flickered, once, twice, then burst into darkness. The hallway stretched deeper now, longer than it should have been. The open door at the end seemed farther away. I could feel something moving beyond it. Not footsteps, just a shift in the air, like a presence unfolding itself. A faint hum began in my ears, low and constant, rising from somewhere deep inside the walls. The whisper came again, this time quieter, almost pleading. Leave before it finds you. My breath caught in my chest. I stepped backward. The floor beneath me creaked softly and then stopped, because the air behind me moved. Slow, deliberate, breathing again. I didn't dare turn around. I just stared at that open door, at the dark beyond it, and then the door slammed shut. So violently the walls seemed to shake. The sound tore through the house like thunder. I flinched, hands covered my ears. When I looked again, the hallway was darker. The door was gone. Not closed. Gone. Just a blank stretch of wall, where it had been moments ago. The whisper returned, but it wasn't beside me this time. It was inside me, repeating the same word again and again. Leave, leave, leave. I stumbled backward, my heart beat too loud to count. The air pressed against my chest, thick with something unseen. I tried to reach the front door, but the space around me felt wrong. Shifting, breathing, like the house itself was holding me in place. The whisper rose to a tremble, every word sharper than the last. Then it stopped. Silence. Total silence. No hum. No breathing. No sound at all. The kind of silence that hurts to listen to. I stood still, waiting for the next thing to move, the next thing to breathe. And in that stillness, I felt one final breath against my ear. Not cold this time. Warm. Human. It spoke softly, almost kind. You waited too long. I turned, and there was no one. The air rippled where something had been. The space behind me felt hollow, empty in a way that didn't make sense. The lamp flickered one last time, casting a faint, trembling light across the floor. There, in the reflection of the window, a shadow leaned close behind me, its head tilted, mouth open just enough to whisper again. But I couldn't hear it anymore. The light went out, the whisper faded into the dark, and the house finally stopped breathing. Morning came quietly, the kind of pale light that doesn't warm anything. It just settles over the furniture like dust. I hadn't slept. The night had stretched too long, folding over itself again and again until I stopped knowing what hour it was. Now the house was still. Every sound had been swallowed. Even the old pipes seemed afraid to move. I sat in the same spot on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket, staring at the same space on the wall where the shadow had been. It was gone. The whisper, the cold breath, the hum, all of it, but the silence that followed felt heavier. Not peaceful, not safe, just empty. The air held a faint chill. Each breath I took fogged slightly before fading away. The windows were streaked with dew, their glass trembling with light. Outside the sky was pale gray, a soft sun struggling through thin clouds. It should have felt like a beginning. It didn't. I stood slowly. The floor groaned beneath my bare feet, as though reminding me it was still there, that I was still here. The living room looked normal now. No shifting shadows, no dimming light. Just furniture sitting where it should, quiet and unbothered. And yet, something was wrong. The air was too still, too flat, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to speak first. I walked toward the kitchen. The faint scent of coffee grounds lingered, though I hadn't made any. The mug on the counter was damp inside, as if it had been used, then set back. My hand hovered over it, hesitant to touch. The porcelain felt cold, lifeless. Every small detail pulled at me. A chair slightly turned from the table. The clock on the wall, its second hand stuck between ticks. The silence began to hum again, not with sound, but with weight. I found myself whispering, just to break it. Is it over? The words barely left my lips. They disappeared into the air, absorbed by the stillness. I didn't expect an answer, and none came. I moved to the window. The yard outside was damp with morning fog, the grass heavy with dew. The world looked softer, blurred at the edges, but there were footprints, faint, leading from the porch steps to the edge of the yard, then stopping abruptly in the mist. I pressed my palm to the glass. It was colder than it should have been. The memory of last night pressed against me. The whisper, the door slamming, the voice telling me to leave. I didn't. I had stayed. And now, in the quiet light of morning, it felt like something else had stayed too. The air behind me shifted, not movement, just that subtle change, a feeling of space being shared. I turned slowly. The hallway was empty. The walls glowed faintly with reflected light, soft and harmless. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that the house was watching, not with eyes, but with memory. I walked through each room, bedroom, bathroom, closet, all the same. Still, the mirror in the hallway caught me off guard. My reflection looked pale, washed in that gray sunlight. But my eyes, they looked tired in a way that didn't belong to me. I leaned closer. For a moment, I thought I saw someone standing behind me. A shape, a shadow without form. Then it was gone. Just a faint smudge of my breath against the glass. The unease didn't fade with the light. It lingered, soft and patient. I made another circuit of the house, checking doors, touching walls. Everything felt too normal, like it had been reset just for me to notice the difference. When I returned to the living room, the lamp I'd left off was glowing faintly, not bright, just enough to cast a pale circle of light on the floor. I didn't move to turn it off. I just stood there, watching dust drift through the beam. The quiet was almost kind now, familiar, but not comforting. It felt like being watched by something that no longer needed to show itself. I sat down again, the same spot, the same couch, the same faint chill against my neck. Outside, the sun climbed higher. Its light touched the corners of the room, but never reached the center. I thought maybe that was fine. Maybe that's how it had always been. Because sometimes when the light shifts just right, I think I still see it, a faint shimmer in the air beside me. Not a person, not a ghost, just presence, as if the house remembers, as if the whisper never truly left. I close my eyes for a moment, let the silence settle around me. The floor creaks once. A soft breath moves through the room, and I realize I'm not afraid anymore. Not really, just aware. The house and I, we share the same quiet now, the same stillness. Maybe that's what it wanted, not to scare me, just to stay. The light outside grows brighter, but the air stays cold. I take one slow breath, and for the first time, the whisper doesn't speak. It just lingers there, close to my ear, like the echo of something that once was and never quite went away.